Hey, Demon Dev here, and I've got a bit of a hot take today, which is there's no such thing as clean code. And I know already any programmers watching this are scoffing. I'm going to constrain this to the realm of indie game dev to make it a more effective argument. But what I mean by that is clean code is the idea of it is basically, something that's made well in a way that will be easy to work with, to expand upon, to read, that, yeah, that's maintainable and easily usable. It does what it needs to do. And that's a great thing. But I think it's not a worthy priority um, early in the game development process. I see a lot of times people working on projects that are nowhere near like mechanically complete, like getting to the stage where you're optimizing or polishing, um, takes a really long time. And so if you're in the maybe what you could think of as the first half or maybe even first two thirds of the game development process, what I think is the highest priority there is working with just the testing of the core mechanics. How is the character gonna move? What are the core features for attacking or defending or, taking damage, stuff like that. You should be attacking aggressively. You should, personify the code that you create should have the emotional characteristics of, like, a monster, like scavenging, rampaging bear or something. And what I mean by that is, moving quickly, just trying to, see does this work? Does that work? Um, Making ridiculous numbers of if statements that are Boolean checks instead of switch cases, using lots of game objects. I'm thinking specifically within Unity, but the same concept applies elsewhere, just setting things on and off to quickly demonstrate features, stepping outside of, what feels like the right paradigm of doing things and just being like, well, I don't know how I can make this script integrate into the rest of the game. Maybe there's a crafting system, but there's a special like mini game within that crafting system that you want to test and play with. Like maybe there's a skill-based timing section to craft something better. There's like a critical strike area that you have to hit or something like that. You should be pursuing development in the most lightweight the most lightweight process possible. And that will, breathe life into the project. It's really easy to do things in sort of a game jam approach. And you should embrace that even into the middle towards the end of game development. There are so many advantages for programming and designing and testing that way. You can get through a lot more iterations faster, and there will be definitely times, no matter what, even if you set out to do clean code, but even more so if you are welcoming the more chaotic pile that a lot of my scripts go through in the early phases. You will end up in a scenario where it's difficult to read the code and you're, struggling to understand where some of the glitches are coming from. But even though that can be really painful, one, you don't know for sure you wouldn't face that anyways. I see a lot of people spending a lot of time planning, and then they're all the more frustrated when it doesn't come out too well, or they've overplanned in the sense that they've designed the structure of the code before they could have possibly been certain about the way the design of the features should be. And that creates a very painful sunk costs problem where sometimes you've cleverly designed the structure for some scripts or some organizations of variables, nested inheritance, all sorts of really great, powerful, useful things. I don't hate clean code. I'm just saying it's not a priority, especially in the game development where, in a sense, time is of the essence. At the same time, you have infinite time, and it's really more so of your energy and your ability to manage your own understanding and clarity of direction. How do I keep pushing this project forward? Um, you benefit a lot from dirty, straightforward code. I'm just going to hard code something is the way to get things happening. And I've found with literally anyone I've ever worked with that the reaction to like a shitty quick test script, that is your clean code. That is your pure design when you've been like, okay, in order to see how this animation feels, I don't even know how the sequences will be triggered. I'm just going to constrain, ABC keys to trigger the animations, and in playback, I'll, simulate what would be an automated animation and see how that feels. And then you can record or mix that into the actual animation, stuff like that, like pretty of what a lot of programmers would consider pretty gross quests, filled with magic numbers where you're just hard setting things to see what feels right in a very, rapid pace is the way I think to breathe life into your project. Um, because you can get things done really quickly. Think there will be more glitches for sure, but you should embrace knowing that there will be glitches and think and reflect on, is this an important glitch to deal with? Sometimes the glitch is not actually getting in the way of you testing the core feel or the design of what you're working on. Maybe you're working on an attack or like a chained attack, like 2 or 3 attack combos in a row, and the thing that the scripts that you're bringing in to test with are very gross, and even, a couple hours in, you see how you should have restructured it a completely different way. It might be worth pushing onwards and pushing towards the completion of that, because you might build that whole script and realize, "Oh, this is great. I just need to do it better so that it will always work every time, and I can, tease out where these glitches are coming from." But almost more importantly, or more dangerously, you may realize after sprinting through the feature that even if it was cleaned up, even if it did work how it should, which you begin to really get a feel for when you block stuff out, of course, you realize that that doesn't belong in your game. It's not right, or it inspires a completely new direction. And in that case, which in my opinion, game development is more about letting tons of ideas flow at you and then knowing which ones to let stick to you in your game and which ones to, release back into the wild as you, test and discard. I think that more represents the process. And so, because of that, an extension of that is you need to do everything in your power to not get attached to your code, to not get attached, in many cases, to your art assets as well. Although art assets tend to be more flexible as far as mechanics go than the scripts themselves, in my experience. But of course, it's case to case, and your results may vary. But just something to think about, because I don't think it's a very common perspective that's out there. So I definitely like to offer things that I think you can't get elsewhere. And so I really encourage people, and maybe I'll do a video on Yandere Dev, leaving the personal issues aside and just thinking about the programming. A series of if statements is not inherently bad. If you're trying to test core feature sets, you want that to work as fast as possible because there may be a set of similar features. Does it make sense to make a switch case for all the different like outfit types or face types or expression types or personality types before you know all of the different components, at least at a basic structure that go into it? Maybe not. You could spend a lot of time designing those sorts of organizational data structures, or whatever you want to call it, just different custom classes, nested in one way or another. You could spend a ton of time, and then if you realize way later, or maybe it will block you from realizing, you could realize way later that that was a good use of time. But statistically, I think it's most likely that there will be some sort of redesign or change, at which point you would have been better off racing ahead, figuring out what you like, what you don't like, and then on the next go, on the next iteration, lean into the design. I still think that you should maintain a very aggressive programming style where you're not worrying too hard about whether you'll be able to read it next week. What you want to know is, you have an idea. Is there something valuable about this idea? What does it feel like when it's in the game? Pay as little as possible for that experience. You're the, you have the ideas in your head. So you don't need that much of the total mechanic of the total feature to be like, oh, this could be cool, or oh, not. And, maybe you do or don't have a feel. Maybe you do need to build it out fully in order to get that feel. But you want to hope that you can gray box anything. You can gray box the art, the environment. You should be able to gray box the code. You want to take that approach because the sunk costs is going to torture you to develop a beautiful programmatic system that mechanically maybe is not not that fun, or doesn't compel you in the way that you hoped it would. You don't want to spend all your time working on something that will fight against what would be your rational sense for what will make the game better. Anyways, just some thoughts on that. I wish you all the best of luck with all your projects. Talk to you again soon.